Hey YouTube, it's Cash. I'm sitting on the floor again. we're gonna make some music with test equipment. I did some in the last video, so if you haven't seen that, go check that out. But as promised in that last video, I said I was gonna go into explaining what's going on here in more detail, and that's what we're gonna do. Now I picked these. I have more stuff than this, but I kind of use these or pick these units for specific reasons, for different textures and stuff like that, and you'll kind of see why as I go through them. This is a BK Precision function generator. It's like probably the newest, and it was the cheapest function generator that I purchased. It's not as warm as something like this, but it has some grittiness to it that's interesting. So that's why it's part of this setup. This is something new that wasn't in the last video. Is a Thornton electronic stimulator. I basically have it because it was in the same box as this, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So I figured why not, give it a whirl, but it does have some interesting pulse control, but I don't recommend using this sort of stuff. It's used for medical purposes, and the voltages are high, and they can like fry just about anything that you're dealing with for the most part. For as small as it is, it can be dangerous. This is a WaveTech sweep generator, which is kind of like a function generator, but has a sweep function, which you can sweep from one frequency to another. So it creates like this ramping effect, and all these stuff can be sequenced with, and it creates some really interesting sounds when you sequence it. This is an HP function generator. This is probably I think this is the first one I've ever had. I've had this for a long time, and it has a very warm sound. It's great for using it with like bass tones and stuff like that, and that's primarily what I use it in this setup. This is another function generator by HP, and it's very similar to this, but it has a modulation control. The inputs on these are in the rear of the device, so if you're looking at them, if they're being advertised and you're trying to only see a picture in the front, you're like, oh, where's the input on that? It's actually in the back. This is probably the coolest thing out of all this stuff. I mean, this is great too, but this is definitely really cool. So this is a HP word generator, and it's basically a 1632 or a 64 step sequencer. It has this RZ or NRZ button, which means return to zero or non-return to zero, which basically means that if it returns to zero, then if you select a bunch of these in a row, it's separate pulses versus like one pulse, which is a cool feature. And you obviously have a lot more manipulation, with it as well, which between the rate generator and the amplifier control, you can do some really cool things. Now this is the BCP data sequence generator. I talked about that more in the last video, so if you want to hear about that, check out the last video. You'll actually hear it used though more specifically in this video. In the last video, I basically turned this on and off, and it was clocking everything. So everything went from just waves to like all this crazy stuff that was going on, all just with the click of this button. In this video, I'll be turning this on and off, and you'll see it's a much different thing. Not only does it sequence stuff, but it actually elevates and changes some of the tones when it's on. So when you turn it off, it sounds like everything's dying, which is kind of cool. So it's just another way to kind of like show how that you can use this stuff. In the last video, I used a lot of pedals. I wanted to kind of keep this more pure sounding, so you kind of really get a sense of what it sounds like. But I wanted to play with it a little bit, so I got a Pioneer reverberation amplifier, which it used to be a permanent part of my setup for the Ultra Efft show. It was on Vimeo. I might put a link to that down below, so you can just check that out. It's great I used to just left it on all the time when I did the show. It really kind of like, when you're dealing with electronic stuff, it's all in a box. It just kind of softens things. It's a spring reverb. You hit the top of it just like a spring reverb and create, get that sort of sound. And it's, it's warm. It's pretty warm sounding, and it's, it's small. I know they make smaller ones, but I kind of like using this old stuff. It makes it more interesting. I like the look of it too. I'll also be using a DBX 119, which was mainly used for like hi-fi or like used with tape machines. It has some unique sounds to it. Like, it's not just a compressor. I look at some of these things like the reverberation amplifier is they're almost like effect pedals in a way. They have some sweet spots on it, and sometimes it sounds terrible. But if you find those sweet spots, it actually can do some really cool stuff, especially when you play with the mode, and you dial it back. It creates almost like this like flapping kind of weird sound, like with drum machines and stuff. It really sounds interesting. Especially if you pair it with something, like this. MXR submachine. It sounds really cool with drum machines. I'm also be using the Como Electronic FT201. That's a 10-step sequencer and a analog filter. It has a sensor on it. It's a proximity sensor. It's not a light sensor, so you can use it in the dark, and you can patch that into the controls on it to do some various things. It has a really cool sound. You'll hear what that sounds like. So I hope that gives you a better idea of what's going on with this and why I picked these different items. I'm probably going to do a couple more of these, and then I'll try to move on to something else. I don't want to like do test equipment videos for forever. This will kind of give you an idea of what I'm doing. There's this guy up here, which I didn't really talk about, and that's going to be in a later video. But I'm going to start changing some of these things out too. I think I'm going to do, like, in the next video, I'm probably going to do something more ambient sounding. So, again, this is a new thing for me. So, click subscribe, like, and let's see how this, let's see what this does.